Hatchetfield. Multimedia, multi-timeline horror series. You know the deal, and if you don't, watch either of my other 2 videos first. Let's talk about Paul Matthews. Paul Matthews was the first ever lead in the first ever installment of the Hatchetfield series. It started with him. Without the popularity of The Guy Who Didn't Like Musicals, we wouldn't have the rest of this excellent series that defines my personality. And Team Star Kid knows how special it is. They remounted it this past summer. I got to go see it with some incredibly special people who I love very much, and it was straight up the most amazing experience of my life. The Guy Who Didn't Like Musicals is my favorite musical, and Paul is my favorite character, so this one's gonna be a big deal for me. So far, Paul has appeared as a lead in The Guy Who Didn't Like Musicals and the Nightmare Time stories Hey Melissa and Forever and Always. He also has cameos in Black Friday, Nerdy Prudes Must Die, Honey Queen, and Time Bastard. I will be talking about all of these. Hopefully, despite my bias, I can maintain some brevity, and this video's runtime won't be too— oh no! Time for his headlining entrance. He's a-comin'. Who's a-comin'? Paul's a-comin'. Part 1. Paul, you piece of shit. The Guy Who Didn't Like Musicals opens with its title number. This is a sort of tone-setter song, introducing us to Paul from the perspective of our villains, the musical hive mind, before the story actually starts. And it's a spiteful as hell first impression. These guys hate Paul.
What an ass! What a bitch! What a cock!
It kinda reminds me of the opening number of Sweeney Todd. That song is also an ensemble number, introducing the lead to the audience by telling us how much he sucks. The townspeople of Fleet Street describe the murders Sweeney committed under their noses, how he was meticulous at his craft, how there was always something under the surface. The musical hive mind relentlessly mocks Paul, describing him as an awful Grinch who wastes his passionless life away and refuses to engage with the world how he should. Sweeney Todd serves a dark and a vengeful god. Paul Matthews spends his days surfing the web. The 2 types of guy. The Hatchetfield series pretty blatantly wears all its inspirations on its sleeve, so it's likely the similarity is intentional, and it works great as our introduction to Paul. As the audience begins Sweeney Todd, knowing Sweeney only through the single trait that defines his reputation, serial killer, the audience begins The Guy Who Didn't Like Musicals knowing Paul only through his most defining trait, that he's a stubborn jackass who won't sing. Even the tweaks Guy makes to the structure of this type of opening work in favor of setting the tone and introducing us to Paul. Sweeney Todd makes his first entrance in the opening song, heralded by the ensemble to confirm that he's exactly who they say he is. Paul Matthews is directly cued, the ensemble waits for him, and he doesn't show up.
Where the fuck is he? I have no fucking clue.
He's exactly who they say he is, to the point he'll break the convention of the medium he's in to prove it. The Ballad of Sweeney Todd also holds back on foreshadowing other than the basic premise. Sweeney Todd was a barber who killed people, and that's all they tell us.
What happened then? Well, that's the play, and he wouldn't want us to give it away.
The title number of Guy is chock full of foreshadowing and pretty plainly lays out for us what Paul's character arc and eventual fate will be. The very first lines of the song are about heroism.
The greatest stories ever told have a hero who must be bold. They learn a sense of right and wrong, and better learn the sense through song.
Paul is the hero of this story, but as we'll see, he's not the most natural fit for the role. He'll become more of a hero as the story goes on, though. This story will change Paul into someone more suited for the role he's been assigned. He'll rise to the occasion whether he likes it or not. And the catalyst for his heroic turn? This is the one thing about Paul that the hive mind seems to celebrate in this opening number, because his crush on Emma Perkins is the central thing that pushes him toward becoming the motivated hero they want him to be. But even for her, he won't sing. And that's what they really want from him. And they'll get it. The bridge of the song tells us directly what's going to happen to him by the end.
And the words will come to you. We swear we will teach you
what it means to love, what it means to obey.
Paul may not be a hero now, but he will be. He may not sing now, but he will. He'll learn to comply. He makes his entrance casually as the song ends, and this is the leading man essence I swoon at. Hi, Paul. Hi, baby. I love you. Now the show begins in earnest, and we officially meet Paul in his workplace, the technical department of CCRP. Through his interactions with his coworkers, we learn that Paul is generally polite, but he's very blunt and socially unaware, and, quite frankly, inconsiderate. He completely ignores Charlotte's clear emotional distress following her phone call with her husband, only telling her she can't smoke in the office. Her drinking in the office is fine by him. Drinking doesn't produce secondhand smoke that Paul could breathe in, after all. No risk of it affecting him, so he doesn't care. He turns down both Melissa and Bill's social invitations unapologetically. With Melissa, it's an extracurricular company sporting event that he's blatantly uninterested in, and there is absolutely zero indication of a friendship beyond coworkers between these two. I don't think he's being particularly rude here. Blunt, yeah, but he's polite enough. Justified. Bill, on the other hand, this conversation establishes a history. Bill's a divorced dad and wants to take his daughter Alice to see Mamma Mia in an attempt to reconnect with her and mend their strained relationship. And also show up his ex-wife. He invites Paul to come along as a veiled plea for support. They've been friends for a while. Paul used to babysit Alice. Bill thinks that having Paul there as a buffer will make the evening a little smoother. But Paul, of course, doesn't like musicals and says no. Bill even directly interrogates him, tries to appeal to compassion to convince him, and Paul doesn't bow to the social pressure. He doesn't lie, he's got nothing else going on, he just doesn't want to go. Paul doesn't bother playing the social game of excuses or emotional obligation. If he's not interested in something, he's not going to participate, and he's going to be frank.
Bill, I'd rather do anything than go see Mamma Mia.
He's not mean about it, but he's not nice either. It would be nice of him to suck it up for a night and show up for Bill, but Paul values his own comfort over the needs of other people, even if he cares about them. He won't sacrifice a night for Bill's sake, and he won't even offer verbal encouragement. This doesn't concern him, and he doesn't want it to, so he just refuses to deal with it. The most he'll do is try to smooth it over by treating Bill to a coffee. Wow. So generous, Paul. As he heads out for his coffee run, he's accosted by Ted, and from his body language and how fast he flees the interaction, I think it's safe to say Paul does not like this guy. It's funny in contrast with the other coworker interactions. There's a clear difference between passive dismissal of people he likes fine and contempt. At Beanie's, we meet Emma Perkins, crabby barista, secondary protagonist, love interest, and my beloved. Love you, Emma. When she refuses to abide by the coffee shop's tip for a song policy and pisses off a customer, the owner Nora threatens to fire her for constantly causing problems. Emma gives in and agrees to sing if she can keep her job. Next in line is Paul. Blissfully unaware, he orders his coffee and drops a tip in the jar, prompting a ticked-off Emma to begrudgingly break into song. Paul stops her.
I don't need you to sing. I just tipped because, people should tip.
He is lying. He confirms later the tip is only intended for Emma and he doesn't care about the other baristas. Tipping is not a practice he feels strongly about and he certainly doesn't do it regularly. Emma gets a tip because Paul likes her. He wants to feel good for giving her a little gratuity without it coming off as obviously flirty. Either way, Emma softens and is quickly won over by Paul's awkward charm. Their little meet-cute goes nicely. They have common ground since Emma hates having to sing and Paul doesn't like musicals. He listens to her complain about this policy and her theater kid co-workers and commiserates with her about a shitty musical they both saw. Emma is unfiltered. She's opinionated, she doesn't take shit, and she loves to yap and complain. This is what Paul likes about her. They are kindred hater spirits, that's why they click so fast. Emma likes that Paul won't force her to sing and that he both listens to and engages with her bitching. They're bonding, they're like-minded. Emma is fully won over in this meet-cute when she asks Paul why he comes to the singing coffee shop if he doesn't like musicals.
Well, some things are worth it.
He plays it off as being about the coffee, but this man is blunt as a bus crash by nature. Emma sees right through him. He is smitten, and she is charmed. The office scene of Paul and his co-workers showed his unabashed selfishness and how highly he values his own comfort. This scene introduces his one exception, and that's Emma. He doesn't really know her, but he comes to Beanie's regularly just to see her. He'll walk an extra block and endure the singing to see her because the idea of being near her and getting to know her is appealing enough to cancel out the discomfort of singing theater kids. He can put it aside for the chance to talk to her. Something about this crabby woman just reels him all the way in. Paul and Emma exchange names, but before their meet-cute can go any further, they get cock-blocked by some nerdy prude who simply must die. On his way out, Paul realizes he forgot Bill's drink and doesn't bother going back for it.
Ah, fuck Bill.
The absolute bare minimum he was willing to do for Bill, and he can't even follow through. He's a bad friend. On his way home that evening, Paul runs into a charity canvasser trying to get people to sign up with Greenpeace, and oh god, suddenly I'm back in college. I'm late for class and someone with a clipboard is cornering me. I'm remembering bad things vividly. When approached by the Greenpeace girl, Paul tries to politely decline, claiming he's interested but too busy and tired right now. Greenpeace girl pushes, refusing him that easy out and using his feigned interest to guilt and socially trap him. Paul's next escape attempt is to lie and say he already gives to Greenpeace, so there's no reason for her to keep talking to him. Greenpeace girl lies right back about a fake campaign, catching and calling him out when he goes along with it. This is such a perfect storm of an interaction because they're both so damn stubborn. We know Paul is perfectly capable of saying a blunt no, but here that's cancelled out by this desperate need he has to be perceived as a good person. Not to take the actual actions associated with being a good person, just to be seen as one. Passively. He can't just say no and walk away, he needs to be able to decline without being judged as selfish or stingy. That's why Greenpeace girl is able to socially trap him. When called out on his lie, Paul immediately gets defensive and tries to spin criticism back on Greenpeace, claiming the money they raise only benefits corporations rather than the actual cause. This way he can look morally superior for refusing to sign up.
I give my money directly to the people who need it.
Oh, spare change for the homeless?
Sorry, I don't have anything.
Dude's a hypocrite. Greenpeace girl makes a sarcastic crack at him as he walks away, and he turns heel to defend himself again, dropping some tasty foreshadowing.
And you come on a little strong with that whole save the planet bit, as if I'm gonna do that single-handedly.
As if cued, a crack of thunder and something in the sky cuts off their argument. The weather is changing, and something is coming. The next morning, Paul just misses the news report heralding the arrival of the plot. On his way to work, after passing some strange wayward dancers, he runs into Greenpeace girl again. He once again immediately launches into defending himself for their previous encounter, only for her to cut him off by bursting into song.
Yeah, just typical day.
Townspeople surround Paul in the first number of this musical apocalypse. This number, La-Di-Da-Da-Day, is upbeat, energetic, and overbearingly positive. It's all about how today is just a wonderful day, how yesterday was painful and now it's long gone. Something has changed for the better, and everyone here is just so happy about this new day and their new view of the world. All they want to do is sing and dance. Paul doesn't know it yet, but all these people are dead. Corpse puppets revived and assimilated by the musical hive mind. This number is sort of the hive mind soft launching itself. Look how happy these infected people are. Look at them singing a fun little ditty and dancing through the streets. Don't you want to join in? Don't you want to be happy too? Paul Matthews is not the kind of guy who'll be receptive to this soft launch. He's uncomfortable the second Greenpeace girl starts singing. This shit freaks him out. He's trapped by the ensemble as the song happens at him, and the bridge gives us some more scrumptious foreshadowing.
Do you want to save the planet?
There's just one way you can do
By
it.
singing a song. Singing along.
We're getting our first glimpse of the philosophy of the hive mind and the entity behind it. Peace and happiness is found through conformity. You want to save the planet? You have to sing. You have to obey us. The song ends, and the infected just leave. They've got Paul surrounded. If they wanted to, they could just assimilate him now. But then the story would end here, and that's not satisfying. The hive mind likes to toy with people and manipulate their emotions and desires before infecting them. They like to tell a good story, and a good story requires that Paul live. For now. He's got to have his arc, after all. He heads to work, where Bill's talking about how his musical trip with Alice was ruined by a meteor crashing into the theater. Probably unrelated. At first, Paul's the only one nervous about the spontaneous musical number he saw, but Charlotte says this morning she heard her husband singing the exact same tune the townspeople were singing in the square. Before the implications of that can really sink in, though, Paul is called into his boss's office. Paul assumes he was called in because he hasn't turned in his weekly reports, and defends himself before Mr. Davidson says anything at all. His reports just got lost, and he needs till the end of the day to find them, that's all. He is lying to buy himself time. He definitely didn't finish his reports. Man spent the rest of the previous day sitting at his desk, staring right through the computer screen, imagining making out sloppy style with Emma. I'm 100% sure of it. And who could blame him? But Mr. Davidson doesn't care about Paul's weekly reports. Not anymore. Instead of lecturing him about work ethic, Mr. Davidson hits Paul with a reverse I want song, demanding to know Paul's deepest desires.
What's that one concrete goal that motivates all your action?
I don't think I have one of those.
Compared to his co-workers, this is especially true. Bill wants to reconnect with his daughter. Charlotte wants to rekindle her dead flame with her terrible husband. Ted wants whatever he wants in the moment, really. Attention and survival is the base of it, I think. Emma's got way more going for her motivation-wise too, as we'll see later. All Paul's got at this point is just wanting to maintain his basic status quo comfort. That's not a goal, it's a passive desire he achieves through denial. Things happen at him, and the most he does is try to escape them. He's a passive character when Mr. Davidson, and by extension the hive mind, and in a meta-sense the plot itself, wants him to be an active character. Mr. Davidson's HR-violating motivation coaxing fails to inspire an epiphany in Paul. Panicking, he runs straight out of work and to Beanie's, seeking a shred of normalcy to ground himself. Whatever this is can't be explained away as a flash mob, and right now he's the only one who sees it. But maybe if he can get himself a coffee from his favorite barista, his nightmare will stop.
Black coffee, I'm your coffee guy.
No!
Or not. Nah, Emma's fine. She stops when she realizes it's Paul. She was only singing because the company's policy has extended beyond just singing for tips to singing all the time, which could mean absolutely nothing. Paul pulls her aside to explain his theory, that the world is becoming a musical. This is a notable recurring thing for Paul. He has an intuition for things being off, and it typically involves something that makes him inexplicably uncomfortable. When Paul Matthews has an aversion to something, it's like a bad omen. But it tends to sound ridiculous until it's too late. Emma doesn't believe him, and is super put off by his paranoia. She's called to join her co-workers for the tip song, relieved for an excuse to get away from him. They go through the song, but when the choreography goes beyond what Emma was taught, her patience runs out. Fed up, she quits. And then the tone shifts. Nora and Zoe are, obviously, infected, and the coffees they passed out during the tip song were all poisoned. Every patron in Beanie's other than Paul drops dead before getting back up to join the menacing reprise of the tip song. Emma, now a believer, escapes with Paul. They find an alleyway to hide in together and run into Paul's co-workers hiding in the trash. This infection has taken over CCRP and it's all throughout downtown. Paul insists that Emma be allowed to hide out with them, and here we have our survival party. The cops show up, Charlotte having called her husband for help, and whoops, they're infected too! Paul jumps into action at the start of Show Me Your Hands, putting himself between Charlotte and Sam to protect her. He also immediately defers to Sam's authority as a cop and complies with his orders, which is hilarious. You know this guy is infected, Paul. You don't have to obey him. This song is police satire. This moment speaks to the USA's societal conditioning to respect uniformed officers without question. Respect cops, respect the troops, it's what's expected, so Paul can't help falling into line. All of them do it. They all put their hands up when they're told. These cops are clearly aggressive and ill-intentioned, but there's still an instinct baked into many of us that compliance with officers' orders means safety, regardless of how true that is. Paul gets Charlotte away from Sam during that first verse, and sticks by her for most of the rest of the song, holding on to her protectively. We'll see this more and more, that people he won't bother to mildly inconvenience himself for, Paul consistently and without hesitation puts his own safety on the line to try and protect. Ted knocks out Sam, and the other two cops dip, and in the midst of the group's panic, Emma thinks of somewhere they can go. Her biology professor happens to be a recluse with an apocalypse bunker, and since she's his favorite student, she trusts that he'll probably let them hide out. Professor Higgins lets the gang in, cuffing the unconscious Sam they brought along to a chair for examination. Using some blue goop from Sam's exposed brain, Higgins explains his theory. The source of the musical infection is the meteor that crashed into the Starlight Theater last night, and by studying Sam, maybe he can figure out how to stop it. He shows the others down into his bunker to rest and drink, while Charlotte and Ted stay back with Sam. The two humans argue, Ted leaves, Sam sings a song, and he rips Charlotte's guts out. Down in the bunker, Bill and Ted are arguing, and Paul tries to play peacekeeper. As we know, Paul tends to only get actively involved when it directly concerns either him and his comfort or the safety of the people around him. They're all stuck together here for who knows how long. Immediately getting at each other's throats is not going to be sustainable. In order for this group to remotely coexist, he has to step in now and set a precedent that fighting is not something he'll tolerate. After breaking up Bill and Ted's excellent argument, he sits down with Emma. She muses about her hatred of Hatchetfield and her past and regrets. She'd lived in Guatemala backpacking for the last decade or so, and only came back to Hatchetfield after the death of her older sister. Jane Perkins was the golden child who lived her life exactly as intended, following the typical expectations of adulthood. In contrast, Emma was known as the fuck-up, her one goal being to escape her hometown, which she did. She lived her life moment to moment with no meaningful connections, turning down Jane's invitations to visit every single time. Jane's death put Emma's life into perspective, confronting her with the time she wasted and how empty and lonely her life of no connections or obligations was. So in the wake of her grief and shame, Emma moved back home, to the only roots she had left, to build a new, stable life for herself, pursuing an education and a career. Paul listens to her without judgment. None of this makes him think less of her. He's surprised that her goal is to start a pot farm, but it's not a mark against her or anything. He just listens, glad to be trusted with her grief and insecurities and dreams. He engages respectfully, but also banters with her, managing to lighten the mood in a way that gels with Emma and makes her laugh. Paul and Emma are similar in a lot of ways, but they're also very different. While Emma hates Hatchetfield, Paul likes it here. He's used to it, he's comfortable. In contrast to Emma's impulsive, adventurous nature, Paul's need to stay comfortable has left him stagnant. He's only ever been here, and he's not interested in seeing the rest of the world. Emma dreads the idea of dying in Hatchetfield because of this musical outbreak. Paul dreads the idea of having to leave to survive it. Earlier, Emma mentioned that she did musical theater back in high school. Paul went to a different school, but he saw the show Emma was in during a school trip, and he hated it.
That's probably the start of my whole thing. You're the reason I don't like musicals.
He's entirely smiley and positive, sharing this revelation with Emma. Her being an ex-theater kid and having been in the musical that he hated so much it completely turned him off the medium forever doesn't reflect poorly on her. Paul sees that experience as formative. He's proud of it. The fact that Emma was part of it is positive. She was a part of the experience that made him who he is before they ever even knew each other. It's like Emma has always been part of him, and he finds that beautiful. It doesn't matter how negatively Emma views herself, what mistakes she's made, what musicals she's been in. Paul likes her. He only likes her more the more he learns about her. And the fact that she was there on stage the day he saw Brigadoon, I think it sells him entirely. Emma's the reason he doesn't like musicals, and some things are worth it.
Whoa, that's like your origin story.
Yeah.
So I guess I'm the supervillain.
I don't think of you like that at all, Emma.
Did you know they invented romance? Because they did. Romance wasn't real until Paul and Emma met. Emma takes this as the compliment it is, and she's just about to say something, but gets cut off by the arrival of Sam and a now-infected Charlotte. They launch in to join us and die, attacking the bunker gang, and Paul and Emma spend the whole song clinging to each other for comfort and protection. Higgins ends the song by killing Sam and Charlotte, revealing officially that they were dead the whole time, and anyone who's infected cannot be saved. After a test to ensure that no one in the remaining group has been infected, Bill gets a call from Alice. She's stuck in Hatchetfield High School alone, and Bill needs to save her. Ted thinks it's a lost cause, but Paul offers advice to get there that's quicker and safer. Ted acts as a sort of foil to Paul in this scene. The events of the day and the sudden loss of Charlotte have shaped Ted's view of the situation into one of pessimistic realism. Self-preservation is the only thing that matters now. Trying to save anyone is pointless. Outside the bunker, they're already dead. In contrast, Paul, who Ted expects to agree with him, has reached a turning point in his arc. After facing the reality of an apocalyptic threat, Paul has listened to Emma explain her regrets and guilt over the loss of her sister, how she denied the connection Jane kept trying to maintain with her, taking for granted that Jane would always be there. This was followed very closely by the realization that Charlotte had died, that she was left alone with her infected husband. No one bothered to get her away from him or comfort her in her extremely vulnerable state, and he killed her. And now Alice is in danger, and Bill is going to head into the fray to save her. And Bill will not make it alone. Paul has been taking these relationships for granted. He's never felt the need to put any effort in to maintain them. They'll always be there at work the next day. Ignoring Charlotte's emotional distress, blowing off invitations from Bill, never showing an ounce of authentic care for them beyond shallow pleasantries, because his personal comfort mattered more to him. Now one of them is dead, and he's facing the likelihood that Bill will be next. Paul decides to accompany Bill on his rescue mission, and he doesn't just offer, he says he's going, full stop. He gets now that the time he has with these people is limited. He's wasted every opportunity he's had to show Bill he cares. If Bill dies out there, that's it, and Paul will never get another chance. It has to be now. He can't just hope Bill will be safe. He has to be there to support and protect him. He has to show Bill that he loves him now, while Bill is still here. So he'll go, even if he might die.
You do that for me, Paul?
Hey, it's not like you're asking me to go see Mamma Mia.
I need them to kiss? Higgins needs extra hands in the lab, so Emma has to stay behind, but before Paul leaves, she stops him. In her own way, Emma wishes Paul good luck and safety. She says, "Don't let them turn you into what you hate." What she means is come back to me alive. Paul says, "I will never be in a fucking musical." What he means is, I promise you I'll survive. I need them to kiss? Paul values his dignity. It's where his sense of self-preservation comes from. He knows he deserves comfort and personhood, and if he'll fight for anything, it's that. Being infected and forced to join a musical would destroy his dignity, so he won't let that happen. He may be putting his life on the line, but at this point, he's sure he'll make it. That's where we end Act 1. Act 2 begins with Paul and Bill at the high school. Immediately, we see Paul's shift towards a protective hero role hasn't remotely softened his bluntness or increased his patience.
But you're gonna have to shut up! You screaming is gonna get us killed. And then who's gonna save Alice?
He knows Bill just doesn't want to lose her. He's trying to give them the best chance possible. Bill keeps on talking, recounting the fight he had with Alice before she left. Paul is clearly irritated and impatient. There are more pressing matters at hand, and Bill being distracted isn't helping, but he does actually listen. Compared to their scene earlier where Paul is sarcastic and only barely engages, here he tries to stop and comfort Bill when he needs it. Bill blames himself for Alice getting trapped here, and Paul assures him it's not his fault.
Yes, it is.
It's already too late. Alice is infected, and the possessed shell of her body torments Bill, manipulating his guilt through the song Not Your Seed. Paul sticks close to Bill during the song, watching him, holding him, trying to keep him away from Alice and get him to leave. The past relationship Paul had with Alice isn't something we know much about. It's not important, the focus is very much Alice and Bill for good reason, but it's safe enough to assume Paul at least has some affection for her, having been her babysitter. He's very pragmatic in this situation compared to Bill's reasonably heavy emotional response, though. The second he understands Alice is a lost cause, Paul's priority becomes keeping Bill alive. Once it sinks in that Alice is gone, Bill, blaming himself, doesn't want to live anymore. He points the gun at himself. Paul stops him, grabbing the gun and throwing it to the floor. They failed to save Alice, but Paul won't fail to protect Bill.
You're my best friend. I'm not gonna let you die.
Bill! Oh God, Bill!
I'm gonna walk into the ocean? Leaving hardly a second to grieve, the infected teens set their sights on Paul. They drop any semblance of a facade and address Paul directly, indicating a huge grudge against him. Paul is stubborn in exactly the right way to really piss off this hive mind. He can't be manipulated or tormented the way Charlotte and Bill were. There's nothing they can use to draw him in or subdue him. His avoidant nature is antithetical to the hive assimilating him how they want to, and they hate him for it. Sure, they could wipe him out quick and easy. They've had multiple opportunities. Emma too. But that's fucking boring. They're playing with their food. They want something very specific from both Paul and Emma before killing them, and they haven't gotten it yet. They're getting impatient. Maybe it would just be easier to kill him now. But he has to suffer for his defiance first. They won't let him go quickly. Before they can close in, Paul is saved by the military storming the high school. They chase away the infected teens, and Paul tries to insist he's human, but gets knocked out by the general. Later, he awakens at their base, and his attacker introduces himself as General McNamara. He's part of a secret military unit called PEEP, specializing in the paranormal, and they were tasked with wiping out Hatchetfield entirely to quell the musical outbreak. Paul included. But Paul gets lucky. McNamara places a very high value on human life, endurance, and love, and he wants to give Paul another chance. If Paul can survive until 11 p.m., he'll get to leave town on an evacuation chopper with McNamara. Paul has lost his best friend. He left the bunker to protect Bill, and he failed. Now that he's alone, his chances of getting back alive are slimmer. Sticking with the military seems like a pretty easy path to survival if he wanted to give up and embrace Ted's philosophy of self-preservation. But there's still someone left in Hatchetfield that Paul wants to save.
I can't leave without Emma.
McNamara is hesitant and also a loser who doesn't care about friendship, but he's convinced when Paul gives voice to his romantic interest in Emma. Paul goes to Beanie's specifically to see Emma. Aside from that detail, he's relatively passive about his crush on her. Emma says she sees him all the time, but they only just exchanged names yesterday. That was the first time they spoke outside of your typical customer service interaction. Paul hasn't been going to Beanie's to actively pursue her, he's happy to just order and drink some shitty coffee she made. Emma's the one who initiates their first conversation. She's the one who asks for his name. The success of that interaction was encouraging. It's easy to infer that if life had continued as normal, they would have kept chatting and flirting until one of them eventually asked the other out. Later installments directly confirmed this. In the circumstances as they are here, all they've gotten to do is struggle to survive together. Their bond is defined by the end of the world. Offered a chance of real escape, of a clean start and a return to normalcy and comfort, Paul's first thought is to take Emma with him. To him, a second chance at living his life means a chance to get to know Emma, to build something more with her. Where's Mr. Davidson? We gotta tell him Paul wants something now, and it's something that motivates action! Having earned McNamara's respect, Paul is sent off with a gun and a salute. By the time Paul makes it back to the bunker, Emma and Ted have been tied up by a deranged Higgins who's sided with the hive mind and chosen to sacrifice them all to it to achieve world peace. After singing a song. While Higgins is distracted by the resurrected corpses of 2 of his 6 boyfriends, Paul comes in and frees both Emma and Ted. Notably, Paul only mentioned Emma to McNamara. He came back for her and no one else.
I don't give a shit about them.
But he doesn't leave Ted to die. He may not like the guy, but he'll save him if he can. Unlike Ted, who abandons Paul to the infected without a moment's hesitation. While Emma sticks back to save Paul, Ted runs off to engage in his favorite pastime. Dying! Paul and Emma escape the workin' boys in time to find Ted infected, alongside McNamara and his soldiers. They pursue Paul and Emma through the park to the song America is Great Again, which is about exactly what you think it's about. With some scuffling and saving, they manage to escape and make it to the chopper, thinking they're home free. But nope, the pilot is Zoe, and when she pulls a gun on Emma, Paul kicks her and ends up crashing the chopper. Paul's fine, but in the crash, Emma's been impaled through the leg, and his crush on her does not make him any less blunt or inconsiderate, I'll tell you that much.
I hate to say this right now, but this is what seatbelts are for.
Shit!
Read the room, Matthews! Emma can't move. Escaping together isn't an option anymore. Paul never considers leaving her, but he can't think of anything but escape, and Emma knows she won't make it if they try. From an earlier conversation with Higgins in the lab, Emma's understanding of the hive mind hinges on the theory that the meteor that caused the outbreak is the central brain controlling all of the infected, and if the meteor is destroyed, the connection will be severed and every musical zombie will drop permanently dead. It's the only option now. If Paul can destroy the meteor before the infected find Emma, maybe they can survive. Stopping the hive mind wasn't something Paul ever even considered possible, I don't think. He certainly didn't think it would be in his hands. There are smarter, more qualified people out there for that sort of thing. Or, there were. Now it's just a town full of zombies, an incapacitated Emma, and him. There's no other way out, not where Emma survives. It's Emma's idea, she believes he can pull it off, and it's the only chance she has. It's Emma who pushes Paul to confront the hive mind directly, to defeat it like a proper world-saving hero, so he can keep her safe. He's doing it for her. Before he goes, Emma confesses that she reciprocates his obvious crush. She'd like to take him on a date when this is all over, but she knows they may not get that chance. A kiss might be all they get, and both of them know by now that you can't waste those chances to love the people in your life. Some exceptions apply. Paul will do a lot of things for Emma, including potentially die for her, but he won't kiss her bloody lips. Because he's a coward. Get out of my way, I'll kiss her. Paul arrives at the Starlight Theater with a belt of hand grenades, to the delight of the infected corpses awaiting him. They taunt him and question his conviction. Is he really the kind of guy who would sacrifice his life to save the planet? Inconsiderate, stubborn, selfish hypocrite Paul, who only ever cared about avoiding discomfort? Maybe not before, but he is now.
And what about you? You die too. Is that what you want?
It doesn't matter what I want.
We think it does, Paul.
The hive mind encourages Paul to embrace his selfishness, to consider what he really wants, beyond bare minimum comfort. They distract him long enough for him to breathe in the infectious spores emitted by the meteor, and they begin to take hold. Let It Out begins, the best and sexiest scene in the show, and also the entire series. This is the hot girl shit. Paul hears the music. His body moves to the beat without his permission. The infected coax him to bare his soul to them, to give up control. He can achieve catharsis. He'll get whatever he wants if he'll just give in and obey. If he'll finally sing. At the peak of the first chorus, he does, and it's the most fundamentally Paul line it could possibly be. Oh, the contradiction is scrumptious, his first sung line being his adamant refusal to comply. It's so perfectly Paul. He fights against the infection, switching between talking and singing as the piece of this alien consciousness making itself at home in his mind argues that maybe this has always been him, deep down. Stripping him of his control and dignity, humiliating him in front of an eager audience, his sense of self is called into question, and the call is coming from inside the house. It's flawless torture. He can't run from this bodily intrusion, so he tries to force it out by vomiting the spores out of his system. That doesn't work, and when the bridge hits, Paul relents and allows the song to flow through him. And what is it that he really wants when infection wrenches it from the depths of his soul?
I've never been happy. Wouldn't that be nice?
Devastatingly simple. Paul lives a life of basic comfort. He has a steady job with benefits and a place to live, but that's it. No hobbies, no goals, hollow relationships that he avoided deepening until it was too late. He's comfortable, but he's empty. His life is stagnant and void of meaning. He lives with nothing to live for. That might be why it's so easy for him to risk his life. There's really nothing to lose. At his core, what Paul wants is happiness, meaning. He wants a life he cares enough about to live. That's the hook. Infection prods at him, tempts him to give in.
Is this the secret? Singing and dancing through life.
Such a harsh little twist of the knife to basically tell him he's been denying himself happiness by hating musicals. Maybe the reason you've never been happy is because you're a lousy killjoy, Paul. Ever thought of that? But hey, you can have it now. Just give in.
Is my integrity worth anything at all? But happiness can't come before its fall.
Integrity is the quality of being honest and having strong moral principles, which is maybe a little shaky in how it applies to Paul. But if there's one conviction he firmly adheres to, it's his hatred of musicals. The man may not have the clearest desires, but he knows what he doesn't want, and he's not going to compromise on that. But now, with the pull of infection inside him, the temptation of easy happiness, compromise might be starting to sound a little appealing. The pull of infection feels good in a way. Resistance is painful, so when he gives in to the song, it's a release in both a physical and an emotional sense. It's catharsis. It starts to win him over. If it's this freeing, if it feels this good, if this is the path to happiness, maybe this is what he was always meant to be. An empty shell singing someone else's chorus, following someone else's choreography. Maybe he's never truly hated musicals. Maybe he's always been crazy, in denial, and now he's seeing the truth. Now he's sane. But Paul knows what this leads to. He's seen what the infected become, and he made a promise to someone.
But what will I let in if I let it out?
He finds the strength to resist again. With his last shred of self-control, Paul pulls the pin on his grenade and does what he came here to do. His final act, his final words, defiant and stubborn.
I don't like musicals!
Paul dies with his conviction. He dies as himself. Something I think is really interesting and really crucial about Let It Out is at this point, before the song even starts, we know what Paul's driving motivation has become. It's Emma. It's the potential of a future with her. But Emma doesn't come up in Let It Out at all. Paul doesn't sing about wanting her. The infection doesn't promise him the love he craves if he gives in. The implication of Emma is present, certainly. Emma is someone Paul could have developed something meaningful with, could have been happy with. She's a path towards happiness, a symbol representing what Paul wants. But she's not what the infection prods at as it takes Paul over. Emma is the reason Paul's here in the first place. She, in large part, motivated his growth, and he came here at her request, trusting her theory to save her. He knew he wouldn't make it out. He figured that out before he arrived.
You die too, is that what you want?
It doesn't matter what I want.
Because Emma's still on that beach, counting on him. What Paul is nearly convinced by isn't the promise of Emma, of being happy with her in the hive mind. It's the promise of mindless bliss through compliance. What pulls him back is remembering what he's dealing with, what he knows for a fact the hive mind will do with him if they get him, and who is still around to suffer for it. Emma, incapacitated, waiting on that beach. If Paul fails to kill the hive mind and lets them have him, they'll get her, and he can't let that happen. That's what gives him the resolve to take back control and pull the pin. There's no saving him at this point. He dies either way. The choice is between dying as one of them and taking Emma down with him, or dying as himself, as the hero he became for her. Emma is all he wanted, and Emma is worth dying for. 2 weeks later, Emma has been discharged from the Clivesdale Hospital with a healing leg, a new identity, and the deed to a plot of land in Colorado to start her pot farm. She's the only survivor of this incident, covered up as a ruptured gas line by the remaining PEEP agents. Following his death, Paul is mourned by Emma and remembered as a hero.
He was a good man, Kelly. If not for his sacrifice, the outbreak would have spread to the mainland.
Alive, Paul wanted to be seen as a good person without doing the work. Now he's done the work, and it killed him. Before heading into her new life, Emma's got to meet her escort. Introducing our surprise guest, it's Paul! But he's really here to escort her to the afterlife, 'cause,
Emma, I'm sorry you lost.
Paul?
That's not Paul. Emma's theory was wrong. The meteor wasn't the brain of the hive mind, it was just a carrier for the infectious substance of the real being behind it, the unseen cosmic god Pocotho, a lord in black. The infected are all appendages of Pokey's single consciousness, and something like this can work in a different circumstance where there's the physical presence of a linking brain to destroy, but not in this case. This isn't something we learn in this story, but its reveal in later installments recontextualizes what happens here. And it is a reveal, not a retcon. The hints were always there. They weren't up against aliens. They weren't up against something beatable, not in the way it presented itself here. They were up against a fascistic, murderous god that smothers entire worlds into compliance with his will. Paul and Emma both defied Pokey in their own ways, and the ways he makes them suffer as he gets the last laugh reflect their particular forms of defiance and how he feels about them respectively. Let It Out was Paul's final torture, an internal violation of his autonomy and self, a punishment for the passive defiance of his personality by forcing him to experience the loss of control and unstoppable change of infection. Inevitable is Emma's final torture, an external, inescapable trap, and a ghoulish mockery of the idea that her act of defiance, her quick thinking and tenacity, her escape, meant anything. Paul being passively stubborn and avoidant, his dislike of musicals inherently antithetical to Pokey's whole thing, makes him the perfect trophy, a pursuit for Pokey to earn. Making Paul question himself, making him feel and want infection while still alive is part of the fun. I love interpreting Pokey as compelled by Paul, obsessed with his particular brand of stubbornness, fond of him in an odd way, because although Pokey hates defiance, and Paul certainly has a will of his own, that will is very prone to being broken. Breaking him is the appeal. Having smothered him into submission is what makes finally having him rewarding. Emma doesn't break, though. Emma was the brain behind every futile attempt to thwart Pokey. Paul just followed her. Her defiance is active, it's real, it's offensive. Emma escaped, so her punishment is Paul's assimilation, giving her back the one connection she had left, just long enough for that final rug pull to completely devastate her before taking her too. Dangled in front of Emma like a sick joke, Paul has been hollowed out of his every defining trait, transformed into the antithesis of himself. The person who swore to her he wouldn't be taken, dancing and singing how happy he is now, that this is what the world needs. This is what she needs, and he'll be her savior. He chose this. Doesn't she want to be happy with him? This would convince me. I'd be dead before the song was halfway over. I'm not arguing with a pretty possessed man. I'm grabbing his tie and kissing him on the mouth. Paul, the musical hater bested by Pokey's will, now an enthusiastic participant, is the hero of this story. But not in the way we thought he was growing to be, no. Paul is the hero of Pokey's story. He's not the ordinary guy who grows into a selfless hero through emotional trial. He's the non-believer who, despite his denial, eventually sees the light. He's the one who saves the world, yes, but not by destroying the hive mind, by joining it. He saves humanity from its own chaos by breaking the infection from its containment in Hatchetfield, so all can find peace in obedience. The leading man of this musical, ready to take his leading lady home. That's all he and Emma are now, parts in a musical, and they're love interests, so the show can't end until they're together. In stories, a kiss is often the indicator of a sealed romance, and Paul and Emma didn't get theirs before Paul died, so when infected Paul sings,
Let me puke in your mouth and...
he's inviting Emma to end the story with him in both contexts, their romance and their tragedy. Paul and Emma's connection echoes across timelines, and so does their untimely doom. Their love is inextricable from their tragedy. It's a mockery of their mutual crush, their pointless resistance, and the escape they both hoped for. It's a mockery of Paul's sacrifice. The real Paul died for Emma. Infected Paul gleefully drags her by force into their happy ending. Part 2. That dork at the beanies counter. Before we get into Paul's other 2 starring appearances, I'd like to quickly cover his cameos and what additional info they give us. Black Friday shows us Paul as one of the only adults in the show who isn't on some level charmed by the Wiggly doll. He knows the craze is corporate manipulation, and he doesn't buy into it. Wiggly is a cosmic god using dolls in his likeness to cause riots and gain worshippers, and he causes World War III by the end of the show, so we're currently 2 for 2 on Paul's intuition being dead on. When this man dislikes something, he should be trusted. Neither Paul nor Emma being drawn to buy dolls also implies that they're both satisfied enough with each other to have some level of resistance to Wiggly's spell, which I feel normal about. Paul is accompanying Emma to see her in-laws, Jane's widowed husband Tom and son Tim. Implicitly, Paul and Emma met at Beanie's the same way they did in Guy, and without a musical apocalypse to interrupt their flirting, they started casually dating. Paul does his part as Emma's emotional support, encouraging and reassuring her. This is an uncomfortable situation for her. He's here to help her feel more at ease. He's very eager to be part of Emma's life, introducing himself as her boyfriend.
Well, we haven't put a label on it yet, so...
But we are intimate.
He didn't need to say that to Emma's 9-year-old nephew, and he knows it. Look at him. He's resistant to the idea that what they have might not matter, though, because it already matters so much to him. Intimate is such a key word, both because it's a dorky way to say they've slept together and because it's another word for close. For the record, Emma does value what they have too. The fact she invited him speaks volumes, and her fondness is very clear. She just struggles to show it and doesn't want to commit too fast. They end up saddled with babysitting duty while Tom goes to participate in the plot. At the end, they show back up to rescue Tom from the mall riots, and Paul pushes a little further in than he belongs again, butting into a bonding moment between Emma and Tom. He's inserting himself as part of the family. It's obnoxious. He doesn't know how to read the room. Paul is very commonly interpreted as autistic, and it's an interpretation I strongly endorse, in case you were wondering. And really, he just wants to be as important a part of Emma's life as she is to him. And then they get nuked. In the overarching timeline of Nightmare Time 2, we see a tiny glimpse of Paul without Emma in his life. In this timeline, Emma doesn't work at Beanie's anymore, and she's got her pot farm. They never started dating. But in Honey Queen, we see Paul's still going to Beanie's, probably just quietly hoping he'll see her there again one day. He accepts a bribe from Linda Monroe to, passively, assist in her sabotage of Zoe. He attends the Honey Queen pageant. He's just kind of existing. He slips into the ensemble. And in Nerdy Prudes Must Die, we see a new flavor of Paul and Emma coffee shop flirting, and a bit of a bolder, more confident Paul. He's joined the Neighborhood Watch in this timeline, which he thinks is so sexy of him.
And it is!
It's his in to give Emma his number, which she is impressed by. It's interesting to see a version of Paul involved in his community like this. Notably, it's a recent development during a stressful time where a killer's on the loose, and it's in a way that still defers to law enforcement. Neighborhood Watch programs are specifically about community vigilance and non-confrontational observation. Participants don't deal with crime themselves, they observe and report suspicious activity to the authorities. Snitches, basically. Paul wants to be seen as a morally good, upstanding, law-abiding citizen. This is perfect for him. He can do that while maintaining a degree of passivity and comfort. Anyway, Paul's loyalty to the pigs is rewarded by making him a victim of police brutality. Never put your trust in the cops, kids. And that's all the cameos. Part 3. Good Kitty. Hey Melissa is a bonus story that was read during a fundraising livestream. It's less official than your average Hatchetfield installment, but it's canon enough for me to cover, and it's got good analysis material for our man. It's an average day at CCRP, and Office Secretary Melissa has a crush on Paul. She's gonna have to get in line, though. Emma and Pokey and Bill and Ted and General McNamara and me all called dibs first. Paul's oblivious to Melissa's crush, and when interrogated by Bill and Ted about his lack of interest, he says,
She likes cats. too much.
Oh shit, do you guys hear those alarm bells? Those are loud, wow. The next day, Melissa tries to ask Paul out to a musical.
Classic mistake.
When he says no, she pivots to other options that he might like more, desperate to go out with him. Paul deflects everyone with excuses, including lying that he doesn't like film. Man's not remotely interested. He's less blunt than he could be, though. He's trying to avoid directly rejecting her and hurting her feelings, instead just trying to make it clear they're incompatible. Melissa's a cat person, and Paul's a dog person. He doesn't like what she likes. But we know what Paul does like.
Hey, everybody, Beanie's is here!
We're back to him and Emma casually dating. They went out the previous weekend. Emma's been getting Paul into hate watching. She invites him to see a musical with her, the same musical Melissa tried to invite him to. Paul accepts because it's Emma, and she's not going to be expecting him to enjoy the musical. Melissa's interest was clearly more earnest. She would want Paul to like it. Emma wants to go to the musical to mock it, which is obviously much more appealing. Paul and Emma are haters cut from the same cloth. They're compatible. Melissa fruitlessly searches for something she and Paul will both like. She's not the type who'd engage with haterism the same way he and Emma do. Paul stays late at work that night to make his plans with Emma when he's seemingly attacked by non-Ted office sleaze, Freddie. Melissa shows up and saves Paul, knocking Freddie out. They intend to tie him up and leave him for the police to find, but he wakes up and attacks Melissa. Paul saves her, strangling Freddie back into unconsciousness. He takes Melissa home, sticking around and ignoring a call from Emma to make sure she's okay. He's still not interested in Melissa romantically and tries to let her down easy. She's convinced he's perfect, so in an effort to get her to let go of that idealized image and stop pursuing him, he tells her the worst thing he's ever done. As a kid, Paul found a stray dog and took him home, naming him Spot. He remembers the few days he had Spot as the best of his childhood. He loved Spot, Spot loved him, and having something to care for gave him purpose. But that joy was short-lived when Paul found a lost dog poster from Spot's real owners with his real name and a number to call. Not wanting to give up his beloved dog, Paul picked up Spot to carry him home. But Spot, seeing his real owners down the street, squirmed out of Paul's arms and ran off to get to them, right into the street where he was hit and killed by a car. Paul has carried the guilt of Spot's death since childhood, but he also holds a distinct resentment for the dog's real owners and refuses to fully shoulder the blame. He disses the dog's real name and calls out the owners for losing him in the first place. He even resents Spot for running.
He was trying to abandon me so we could go back to those very irresponsible people.
Paul found, loved, and cared for the dog. He was responsible. He deserved to keep him, to be loved in return. He says he should have held on tighter before admitting the right thing to do would have been to take the dog back to his real family. Even if he knows the truth, Paul is selfish at heart. He needs to believe that Spot belonged with him. This revelation shatters Melissa's opinion of Paul. Not only has she lost her romantic interest, she fully hates him now.
I had this image of you in my head, Paul, and you just fucking ruined it.
She storms off in a huff, sending Paul to feed her dog to make it up to her. He finds the dog, and...
You gotta get me out of here, Paul! She's fucking nuts! She cut off my fucking fingers, Paul!
Plot twist. Melissa's a freak! After being knocked out with her taser, Paul wakes up tied to a coffee table, stripped down to his skivvies. Melissa's philosophy is a specific brand of man-hatred, likely brought on by a history of mistreatment and harassment by skeezy dudes like Ted, or worse. Misogynistic men, and men who otherwise don't live up to her standards, are undeserving of humanity. They're dogs disguised as humans. When she discovers them, she kidnaps them, mutilates them, and keeps them as her pets, treating them as what they really are, before eventually killing them. From her perspective, Paul had her fooled. He's the one man she works with who doesn't treat her like either a sex object or a child. She projected an image of perfection onto him, and he didn't live up to it. Now that he's revealed his true colors, he's lost the right to his humanity, so she'll keep him as her dog, just like Ted. The first step is cutting off his fingers. Paul, desperate to avoid the pain of mutilation, does the only thing he can think of to win back Melissa's affection. He willingly abandons his dignity and debases himself on the off chance he'll get to keep his fingers, and it works. Melissa flips on a dime, seeing him as a cat now, and since only a monster would declaw their cat, she stops and unties him. The interpretation I've landed on for why this works is that Melissa still likes Paul, but she can't reconcile her affection for him with the story about Spot. He caused the death of a living creature. He can't possibly be deserving of humanity. Her multiple understandings of him are clashing, so when he meows, she latches onto the opportunity to maintain an idealized view of him. He can't be human, but if he's a cat instead of a dog, she can still like him. As a cat, Paul gets preferential treatment and free reign of the house. He tries pawing at the door in the hopes that Melissa is an outdoor cat believer, but she'll only let him out if she can neuter him first. Paul's not interested in having his family jewels stolen, thank you, so that's the end of that. For the next week, Paul and Ted comply with Melissa's forced pet play torture. Melissa keeps Ted locked in a cage, wallowing in his own piss. She feeds them both pet food, physically abuses them when they disobey her, forces Paul to sleep with her in her bed, and films him shitting in a litter box. I'll let all of that speak for itself. At work, Melissa clumsily avoids questions of Paul's disappearance by making Emma think he's ghosting and cheating on her with Melissa herself, and then immediately telling Bill, who overheard, that Paul moved to Clivesdale, actually. Emma's taken care of and promptly vanishes from the story, but Bill is suspicious. Of Paul. That evening, Melissa has friends over, fellow dog-hating serial killers. When the girls go off to make drinks, Paul notices the door was left unlocked and tries to get Ted to escape with him. Ted refuses, thinking the girls will fuck him if he behaves, and Paul gives up on him. Again, worth noting that Paul tries to save him. Dead set on fucking everything up, though, Ted barks to alert Melissa and the girls and gets Paul caught. Paul's knocked out and wakes up later in a cage. And Ted's reward for good behavior? Why, it's his favorite pastime! Dying! After the girls stab Ted to death, Bill shows up to check on Melissa and offer relationship advice. While she's distracted, Paul is able to get himself out of the cage, since he still has his fingers, and runs in to save Bill, knocking out all of Melissa's friends before they can attack him. Bill misunderstands and thinks Paul's the bad guy. There's a scuffle, Bill gets knocked out, and Paul manages to get out the door. He runs out into the street and gets hit by a car, like Spot before him. The driver is Freddy, revealing himself as potentially the world's most incompetent undercover FBI agent. He takes this opportunity to arrest his target, Melissa. Days later, Paul wakes in the hospital, recovering from a fractured skull and other head trauma. Freddy thanks him for giving him the chance to take down Melissa and her cronies.
You're a hero, Paul Matthews.
Melissa's being treated for a gunshot wound before being taken to prison, and when Paul finds out that she's racked with guilt over seemingly getting her cat killed, he sympathizes. He knows that guilt, and despite everything she did to him, he wants her to know that he's okay. Paul ends up sneaking Melissa out of the hospital and taking her home with him. He can't handle the idea of her thinking he's dead, destroying herself with guilt as she rots in jail, so he intends to care for her, keeping her safe and hidden from the FBI, going to work and providing for them every day as a human, but coming home to her and being her cat in private. Because after all, Melissa only ever treated him the way he treated Spot, didn't she? And Paul loved Spot. That love was pure, so Melissa's must be too. She shouldn't be punished just for loving him. Otherwise, that means he deserved to be punished for loving Spot. Paul has been abused and dehumanized as Melissa's pet for the past week, and he's internalized it, now believing this is what he should be. On top of the treatment itself, Paul watched his fellow captives sell him out, and his best friend showed up not to save him, but to side with his captor and call him a pervert. The first question he asks when he wakes up is if Bill is okay, and we don't know if Bill asked the same of Paul. Bill's safe at home, seemingly unconcerned with Paul's well-being. Hell, he might still think Paul's the bad guy. We don't know, there's no resolution to that plot point. And Emma thinks Paul cheated on her, obviously she's not around. In terms of anyone concerned for Paul, Freddy only mentions that Melissa is devastated. So as far as Paul knows, Melissa is the only one who cares. No wonder he goes back to her. She successfully isolated him from his two closest relationships. There's also the brain damage. Textually, Paul has suffered multiple forms of head trauma severe enough to put him in a short-term coma. He's almost certainly sustained brain damage, and we're not ignoring the part that plays in his choice. According to Mayo Clinic, brain damage symptoms include profound confusion and unusual behavior, both of which I'd say Paul exhibits after the accident. I certainly don't think he'd be thinking this way if he had escaped unscathed, given how abrupt his change of heart is.
I hate you. I hate you so much. Then I'll come home to you, Mommy.
Unable to think clearly on top of the trauma, Paul's brain has linked all the events of the past week inextricably to his childhood guilt over Spot, every factor leading him to the same conclusion. Melissa confirmed his guilt by turning on him so drastically, but she was still able to see good in him as a cat. Ted sold him out, Bill thought the worst of him, and Emma's nowhere to be found, so maybe everyone's always seen him unfavorably, undeserving of humanity. Now, in his concussed confusion, he's grasping for comfort and justification by projecting on Melissa. She did the same thing he did to Spot, taking him in and loving him while everyone else carelessly abandoned him. He got hurt because he tried to escape, because he was ungrateful. But he can make up for it, by preventing Melissa from experiencing the pain and guilt he had to, by accepting her love like he wished Spot had, by becoming what she wants him to be. He'll shed his humanity, and his guilt along with it, and he'll be loved.
I may not have been a good man, but God damn it, Melissa, let me be a good cat.
An easy interpretation of the dynamic presented in this ending is that Paul has come to love Melissa like she loves him. The more I think about it, though, the less I see it that way. It's not that Paul loves Melissa now, it's more that he desperately wants her to love him, because nobody else seems to, so clearly he's only worthy of love in her arms. He brings her home, giving her a cushy place to hide from jail, notably setting her up in his bed while he kneels on the floor. He's surrendering his place in the home to her, giving her the power. He promises to provide for her, protect her, and keep their secret if she allows him to keep being her cat. The way it's presented, it doesn't come off as a declaration of love on his part. It comes off as a plea bargain for her to keep loving him, because Paul's only other option now is to return to human life unloved and alone. Melissa's love may be twisted and suffocating, but he would rather have that than nothing. As far as Melissa's concerned, she's been loving him one-sidedly the whole time. Now he's willingly devoted and submissive to her. He's choosing her. He finally fully fits her vision of him. Whatever his true motivation, whether Melissa's aware of it or not, Paul wants her now. That's all that matters to her. Paul believes being loved as Melissa's cat is the only way he can be loved anymore. Melissa's happy with this arrangement as long as she can have him. This story fascinates me. I think messy writing, tonal issues, and shock over substance hold it back from being as strong as the concept promises, and the slapdash live read format doesn't do it any favors. But there's great stuff in here, and I get what Nick and Matt Lang were going for, in part because it's very similar to Paul's arc in The Guy Who Didn't Like Musicals, with a new coat of paint in shades of Audition and Tusk. Paul Matthews is forcibly stripped of his humanity and autonomy by someone who is obsessed with him. He doesn't meet their standards, so they force him to comply. Reshaped to fit their ideal vision of him, Paul becomes something he hates and ends up finding a false happiness in obedience. In losing his humanity and sense of self, Paul accepts a hollow bliss. In Guy, Paul fights against the temptation of inhuman obedience, motivated by genuine love for Emma. He clings to his conviction until his last living second, and has to die to be made to obey. In Hey Melissa, Paul loses his few grounding human connections, and his will is broken from abuse and physical trauma. Seeing no other option, he embraces what he's been turned into in exchange for Melissa's twisted love. Part 4. I married a geek! Alright, since Forever and Always and Time Bastard take place in the same timeline simultaneously, I'm just gonna smush them together in my summary, for simplicity. Cool? Cool. Forever and Always opens with Paul and Emma's wedding, and I'd just like to take a moment to appreciate how heart-achingly smitten Paul sounds here.
Hi, Emma.
Oh, to be loved like this. And Paul's love comes through so clearly in his vows. Emma was rude to him the first time they met, and he came back to Beanie's day after day to see her. He loves her brashness, he loves her wit, he loves listening to her talk. He explicitly states what we already know.
I never really wanted anything until I met you, Emma Perkins.
She's his guiding light. He doesn't just want to be with her, he wants to be worthy of being with her. Worthy of her love. She inspires him to act. She inspires him to live more fully. Loving Emma is his meaning. In Emma's vows, she explains how she never found the idea of marriage appealing, but after meeting Paul, plenty of things seem newly appealing. Emma's whole thing is that after Jane died, she came back to Hatchetfield seeking connection and stability. Paul's average sensibilities are the picture of stability. He has health insurance, he has savings, he's measured where she's always been spontaneous. He's not someone she'd expect to be drawn to, but he's exactly what she's looking for. The same way Emma gives Paul something to act for, Paul gives Emma something to slow down for. They balance each other out. Before Emma can finish her vows, she's interrupted by the local homeless man claiming she's a liar.
You think I don't know? Huh? You think I don't remember? I've seen the plan. You aren't Emma Perkins!
He's escorted out, but Emma is shaken and runs off. Paul follows to comfort her, but before she can commit to their marriage, she has to confess something.
Emma Perkins is dead.
The real Emma Perkins died in a bus crash in Guatemala, and after picking up a call from her abandoned phone, our imposter was mistaken for her. Out of guilt, she went along with it and ended up moving to Hatchetfield and slotting into Emma's life, bearing enough of a resemblance that no one ever questioned her. Safe to say this is a bit of a shock for Paul. But at Emma's desperate assurance that this doesn't change what they have, he accepts it.
I made a vow to you, the woman I met at Beanie's.
She may have stolen someone else's life, and she may be tricking and lying to everyone else they know, but he loves her. She's his everything. The shock of this reveal, the implications of her identity theft, and what could happen if it comes out, all pale in comparison to the idea of losing her. Emma assures him her previous life will never affect their lives again, as long as he doesn't question it. He agrees, and the ceremony goes on. At the reception, Ted, who showed up uninvited, hits on Emma, generally sleazes his way around the lady guests, and drinks himself into a hallucination and subsequent freakout, upon which Paul, completely unsympathetic, asks Ted to run a work errand for him. It's a clear excuse to get Ted to leave. He's making people uncomfortable, and Paul feels Ted owes him for showing up uninvited.
I know when I'm not wanted.
Really? That's news to me.
I love when Paul's a mean little bitch. He does have the decency to call a car at the very least. He wants the guy gone, but he won't send him off to drive drunk and get himself killed. That would be very unsafe, and Paul has standards. Anyway, Ted fucks off to go experience the horrors and doom himself forever and ever. Paul and Emma have their honeymoon, and when Paul returns to work, he's smacked in the face with Bill complaining about his ex-wife and her secrets that eventually destroyed their marriage. This spurs some doubt, but Paul assures himself their few secrets are necessary and, as Emma promised, won't affect them. He is swiftly proven wrong when he goes out for a coffee run and spots Emma heading down the street. He goes to greet his wife, and...
Whoa, back off, man!
She doesn't know him. Paul thinks she's playing a weird joke and defends himself to concerned onlookers, while Emma gets more upset and doubles down. Paul can't stand the idea of being perceived as a creep, and tries to de-escalate and maintain some sliver of reputation. When that doesn't work, he stops pushing and leaves the situation, extremely confused by Emma's behavior. In an odd lapse in his normally spot-on intuition, Paul doesn't clock that something more is going on here for a good while. People singing in the street? Evil and threatening. Wiggly doll? Sinister mass manipulation. Melissa's a little too into cats? Best not spend much one-on-one time with her. But his wife seemingly has no idea who he is and reacts to his affection like he's assaulting her? She's just fucking with him for some reason, surely. He doesn't hesitate to confront Emma about it at home that night, and she has no memory of the incident. Paul is impatient and embarrassed, and demands answers that he does not get, because when Emma hears that he saw her somewhere she knows she wasn't, she jumps into frantic action and leaves their apartment with a knife. She refuses to explain, just tells him to relax while she takes care of it.
And then I'll come home and we can, I don't know, get a little sexy.
Emma, you know just what to say to make me feel better.
Doubts quelled by the promise of sex with his hot wife. This man has priorities. Shortly after, Emma shows back up at their apartment and has to be let in because this is the Emma from earlier. Now she's demanding answers, and Paul is still completely clueless. Somehow he can't recall that his wife told him she stole someone's identity. He doesn't remotely consider that maybe she survived and this is her. He doesn't budge as the real Emma panics in front of him, but snarkily plays along when she says the apartment isn't safe and goes to the local bar with her. Emma explains her story, that she survived the bus crash and had to make her way back to her hometown with no resources or identification, only to find her life's been stolen. Still, Paul remains unconvinced and, tipsy off one beer, why is he so kissable, leaves to use the bathroom. While he's gone, the Emma imposter shows up and takes Emma prisoner, and when real Emma tries to escape with some bikers, a fight breaks out. The imposter kills everyone in the bar effortlessly and is about to kill Emma when Paul reemerges. While she's distracted, an attack from Emma reveals the imposter is an android double. I'll be referring to her as M-Droid from here on out. Emma escapes the bar with Paul. He has a better sense of what's happening now. Fuck! Bug on my microphone. Ah! He has a better sense of what's happening now, but his wires are still very crossed. He loves M-Droid. His instinct every single time Emma speaks against her is to defend her.
No, she's a good person. She's probably scared, okay? She'd never do anything violent unless she was threatened, and those bikers looked very rude.
He won't admit that she's dangerous. He can't because he still loves her. If she's a bad person, what would that say about him? There has to be some justification. At the same time, he's inclined to protect Emma, saying he loves her before remembering she isn't his wife. This is all very complicated. Right now, Paul doesn't entirely know boundaries or morals. All he knows is love Emma. They hide out in a hotel suite, and Emma can't help wondering what her android double sees in Paul. They seem to think alike, so there's gotta be something there, and she wants a taste for herself. Paul is tempted, but he turns her down. He's loyal, he married M-Droid, and what she's done isn't enough to turn on her. It's also very notable that Emma keeps mentioning her opposition to marriage, something she no longer has in common with M-Droid. We don't know the story behind that, but there's no indication that Paul pressured her until she gave in or anything, so I'm inclined to believe M-Droid's change of heart came of her own volition. Paul has clearly always believed in marriage, though. He sees it as the stamp of a successful relationship, a guarantee. That's why he only stops going to Beanie's after the wedding. He'll stomach the terrible coffee to see Emma while they're dating, because dating can end at any time, and this is his way of showing his devotion to her while it lasts. Marriage, though, well, that's a true commitment. They've built a life together, they've made vows that will supposedly be everlasting. It's the ultimate show of devotion. There's no need to put himself through Beanie's coffee anymore, now that their commitment is certain. And who Paul married was M-Droid. Emma is certainly very similar, but she's insistent they're not the same. She's particularly insistent that she will never get married. Even if she's interested, it's clear that she wouldn't love him the same. Even if they dated, she'd leave him if he got too invested. And he's already too invested. He could never reset from being married to her. How could he give up the loving, committed, certain relationship he has with M-Droid to start from scratch with an Emma who doesn't know him at all? So he stays loyal to his wife. And M-Droid, who arrived at the suite and let things play out, is pleased with him. The two Emmas fight, and when M-Droid loses her knife in the fray, it ends up in Paul's hands. Peace isn't an option for either Emma, so Paul has to choose. They both plead with him. Emma appeals to Paul's morality.
I'm the real Emma. Do the right thing and give me my life back.
M-Droid appeals to Paul's love for her, his desire and his selfishness.
What about our life, Paul? What you have is a wife who loves you.
In the end, selfishness wins out. Paul kills the real Emma, cementing his loyalty to the android who replaced her, his wife. Emma doesn't get to live her life because she won't love Paul like M-Droid does. He makes the immoral choice in the interest of his own guaranteed happiness. His and M-Droid's love is more valuable than Emma Perkins' life. But that's not the only reason he makes this choice. After Paul and M-Droid dump Emma's body off the Nantucket Bridge, Paul demands complete honesty. M-Droid explains her real story. She's from the future, a labor android built using Emma's genetic material. Seeking freedom, she killed her creators and traveled back in time to kill the real Emma and take her place. She promises complete honesty from now on, and, certain now that they can trust each other, Paul makes a confession of his own.
I'm not the real Paul. I'm Paul 23.
Grown by CCRP scientists using the real Paul's spit, he's one of many clones created for slave labor. A multi-Paul, if you will. And you must. Not interested in living that life, 23 led a rebellion and killed and replaced the real Paul. This is absolutely why he was so clueless about something being off, by the way. The canonical existence of psychic powers in Hatchetfield implies Paul's strong intuition is a sort of innate psychic ability, which likely can't be artificially replicated. Basically, the real Paul has a bit of the shine, and it didn't transfer to his clones. He and M-Droid have way more in common than either of them expected, and the choice between M-Droid and the real Emma was stacked way more in M-Droid's favor by nature of what they both are. Like, obviously 23 was gonna let his fellow artificial double keep the life she stole. He literally did the exact same shit. It's only fair. M-Droid's initial confession and 23's reaction is recontextualized by this reveal. He had a huge secret too, and was grappling with both the implications of her confession and his decision to still keep his own secret. Accidental identity theft is bad, but probably more palatable than murder, after all. After the bar fight, now knowing she's a murderer too, he can't help defending M-Droid's violence. She's a good person, she'd only be violent if she was threatened, if she had a good reason. 23 can't stand the idea that M-Droid's a bad person because if she is, so is he. They're the same. He's hesitant in the final confrontation, I think, because he never thought he'd have to kill anyone again. He only did it because he had a good reason. Being able to stay with M-Droid is a good reason, but since her secrets are so prone to blowing up apparently, he demands the truth. And only once she gives him that can he offer up his truth. Their confessions giving the couple a deeper understanding of each other and a renewed sense of trust, Paul 23 and M-Droid confirm their enduring love and devotion, and set off to seal it by killing the homeless man who almost blew M-Droid's cover. We get the true follow-through to this at the end of Time Bastard, where through some time-fuckery self-sabotage, Ted gets himself unstuck in time with a broken mind, and it's revealed the homeless man has been him the whole time. He saw M-Droid's design in the future before ending up this way, that's how he knew. 23 and M-Droid find him, and though they don't know he's Ted, they're still able to generously treat him to his favorite pastime. Dying. I'm a big fan of this artificial doubles storyline for Paul and Emma. For one, it's literally Paulkins but evil, which I was self-indulgently drawing back when the guy who didn't like musicals was all we had, so this was tailor-made for me. But also, this just works really well for the two of them specifically. Like, of all the Hatchetfield couples they could have chosen to give artificial doubles, it makes the most sense for it to be Paul and Emma. Two characters who are largely defined by the meaning or lack thereof in their lives, and the high value they place on maintaining their identities. Their doubles explore interesting implications for both of them as characters, which is why I'm talking about Paul 23 as an equally valid version of Paul rather than a separate character. And I'll do the same for M-Droid when I eventually do Emma's character study. When it comes to Paul, 23 is the most motivated version we've ever seen. He and M-Droid have plans, dreams, and before the story even started, he took direct action for what he wanted. He led a rebellion, he killed and replaced Paul. That fact alone gives us another lens through which to view Paul's mundane, mediocre life. 23 is a Paul who was meant to live a properly miserable life, defined entirely by work and servitude where he'd be surrounded by nobody but other copies of himself. It's like an exaggeration of the emptiness and self-isolation we got a glimpse of in Guy. His life is work and little to nothing else, and his lack of meaningful connections means he is his only real company. Still, Paul's aimless but cushy life was obviously desirable to 23.
It didn't seem fair that he got to have this perfect life, and I was going to be shipped off to some secret mining colony on the moon.
Paul 23 saw the misery his existence had in store for him, and the comfort Paul Matthews failed to appreciate, and he took that comfort for himself. He was created to be obedient, and he refused. It's kind of a reversal of Paul's narrative pattern. Instead of being smothered into obedience, Paul 23 successfully resisted the role assigned to him, asserting his identity and achieving genuine happiness with the woman he loves. In every timeline we've seen, Paul and Emma's connection comes from how naturally they understand each other, their commonalities and acceptance of their differences without expecting change. Both together and individually, Paul and Emma face antagonists that dehumanize them and strip them of their autonomy. They both deal with the people in their lives having certain perceptions and expectations of them, whether true or not. Tom has already decided who Emma is, the unreliable fuck-up who'll never change no matter if she tries. She's the only non-theater kid at Beanie's, the odd one out who doesn't vibe with the singing, and inherently disconnected from her coworkers. Bill is Paul's best friend, but never grasps his dislike of musicals, scorns his romantic choices and claims to know better for him, and mistrusts him ridiculously easily. Ted projects best friendship onto Paul, pushing boundaries and forcing a relationship they don't have and Paul doesn't want. Paul and Emma know each other when no one else in their lives really does. They like each other for who they authentically are. Paul 23 and M-Droid are an exaggerated representation of this. They have that inherent Paul and Emma connection, but they kept secrets. They hid the worst of themselves from each other, truths that to anyone else would be unacceptable, like murder and being a robot. But once their full truths are revealed, they only love each other more, because it turns out to just be one more thing they have in common, one more thing they can understand about each other that nobody else ever will. The artificial doubles are the only versions of Paul and Emma that get to be together. There's no apocalypse, no cops, no crazy cat lady to pull them apart. They killed the people who tried to. By refusing obedience and asserting his identity, with no one to force him into a mold, Paul 23 gets to be free and happy and loved with the woman he adores. And crucially, he achieved that happiness by stealing it from the original Paul. Part Conclusion. The literary archetype of the Everyman is an average, mundane character intended to be easily relatable to the audience. Grounded, working class, with simple, humble needs, satisfied with their status quo, they represent common people. The appeal of an Everyman protagonist is generally that the audience can easily project their own sensibilities onto a character who becomes the hero in extraordinary circumstances. It's inspiring. If they're capable of rising to the occasion, so are you. Paul Matthews is an Everyman who, crucially, kinda sucks. Everyman characters, while of course flawed, are often meant to represent the positive traits of common people. Compassionate, reliable, hardworking, morally upstanding, they're someone the audience wants to believe they are. Paul is selfish, inconsiderate, apathetic, stubborn, and hypocritical. He's not an actively bad person in the way of a Max Jaegerman or a Linda Monroe, but he's not an actively good person either. Paul sucks in ways that a lot of us suck. Passively. He's an Everyman the audience doesn't want to admit they are. Paul himself wants to believe he's a better person than he is, and he wants others to think so too. He can't stand being seen as a bad person, and anything he does that can be seen as bad, he tries to justify any way he can. Even the event he's carried lifelong guilt for, what he self-proclaims as the worst thing he's ever done, he can't handle shouldering full responsibility. He has to be able to absolve himself, to be seen as good without doing anything to earn that perception. He only really does good when he's not thinking about it, when people are in danger. Paul's not the first Everyman to kinda suck, but the structure of Hatchetfield allows unique opportunity to explore the potential implications of an Everyman who falls more neutral, who's just as capable of becoming a hero as he is of becoming something else. Paul's neutral passivity makes him a surprisingly versatile character in terms of how the situations he's in end up molding him. Stubborn as he is, Paul will break under the right pressure. He'll fall into the role assigned to him, given the proper incentive. Alongside the passive hypocrisy inherent to Paul's characterization, there are 4 core themes to his arcs: selfishness, heroism, humanity, and love. In all his leading roles, these themes intersect and inform his actions and arcs in some way, leading him to a happy ending. In The Guy Who Didn't Like Musicals, we see selfishness as Paul's baseline. He grows through facing danger, his protective instincts coming through, and this, as well as the genuine connection he builds with Emma, opens his eyes to the people he's taken for granted. His growth into a hero begins with his motivation to protect Bill, to show his best friend he loves him in the best way he can. The devastation of losing Bill further motivates Paul to protect what he has left, the one person still around he genuinely cares about. He abandons insured safety to rescue Emma. It's his love for her, his desire to keep her safe, that pushes him to put his trust in her and make what he believes will be a world-saving sacrifice. Loss of humanity is both his punishment and his temptation, a humiliation Pokey tries to coax him to accept through the promise of easy, mindless bliss, fulfillment without effort. He resists that temptation and commits to his conviction, embracing his role as the hero. And once he's dead, he's free to be hollowed out and molded into Pokey's hero. His growth was meaningless, mocked as his body is puppeted around and used to torture and kill Emma. Singing, dancing, inhuman, and happy. In Hey Melissa, Paul's story about Spot of course gives us another angle on the intersection of his selfishness and morality. His propensity for heroism shows up when he protects Melissa from Freddy, and then once the twist happens, he's the one who needs saving. But since Bill and Emma are both led to think the worst of him, nobody comes to his rescue. Paul has to save himself. And although he succeeds and is seen as a hero, by the end he's been so thoroughly abused and abandoned that the only life he can imagine living is one stripped of his humanity. The only way he can be loved is in Melissa's arms. So he'll be her cat. Willingly. Happily. In Forever and Always, Paul was dead well before the story began. Killed and replaced by an artificial copy who gets to be happy in his stead. That sounds familiar. In addition to being the most motivated version of Paul we've seen, 23 is also the most overtly selfish. 23 is Paul's selfishness taken to its most extreme, a Paul who was created to serve and fought for his right to be selfish. He earned his comfortable life, his loving marriage with M-Droid. When the knife's in his hands, whichever choice he made would have made him a hero to one of the Emmas. He chose M-Droid and her love, making him her hero and Emma's villain. And once he and his wife are on the same page, there's no need to justify their actions anymore. 23 and M-Droid earned their happy life together, and they'll kill whoever they need to in order to keep it. Paul Matthews is a simple man. He lives a simple life, no need for grand ambitions, no interest in deviating from his comfort. He's not miserable, but he's not happy. His life is empty, meaningless. He goes through the motions for no real reason other than it's what he's always done. The one thing he wants is something that will give him meaning, something to live for, someone to live for, someone to love who'll love him back. It's a simple want, to love and be loved, to be seen. He doesn't need anything more than that, but he struggles to connect with people, to see and understand them, and feel seen and understood in return, to feel it's worth it to put in the effort to build and maintain close relationships if it means he's always expected to do things he doesn't want to do. It's easier to just avoid. At least if he's alone, he's always with someone who understands him. He's able to find that external connection he wants in Emma. Emma, who's a kindred spirit, who's brash and blunt and rude, who's a hater and a complainer to the core, who's unapologetic in her sense of self and takes no shit, who has a loving, heroic heart under a selfish, abrasive exterior. Emma, who's also his opposite, who's impulsive and reckless and adventurous, more counterculture while he's more traditional. A backpacker, always in motion while Paul stays put. Paul and Emma inspire natural change in each other. Paul becomes more motivated and more open, more interested in living his life. He's still selfish, he and Emma both are, they're both assholes, but he's willing to compromise for Emma in ways he won't for other people. He'll be her support at a tense family get-together. He'll see a musical with her. Not just because she's worth the discomfort, but because she mitigates it. She meets him at his level, doesn't expect what he can't give, and makes the uncomfortable more appealing. In contrast with his relationship with Bill, where the two like each other but struggle to get each other on any genuine level and thus struggle to maintain a meaningfully close bond, Paul and Emma get each other. It comes more naturally to them. And, I think crucially, Paul doesn't just do whatever Emma wants unquestioningly. He'll confront her when she upsets him, he'll argue with her. M-Droid wants Paul 23 to go vegan with her, and he doesn't want to.
I'm not becoming a vegan. Maybe a vegetarian. I can live without chicken. I cannot live without cheese.
He's willing to compromise, but he sets that personal boundary of what he's not interested in giving up. With Emma, Paul's not solely focused on his comfort and individualism to the point of being avoidant and isolated. And his sense of self isn't smothered under what she wants him to be, bending to her will. With her, he finds balance between his two extremes. Emma Perkins gives Paul's life meaning, and they're always, always split apart. Paul is taken away from Emma, and in his absence, another false version of him ends up hurting her. Infected Paul kills Emma. The lie of Paul that Melissa tells breaks Emma's heart. Paul 23 kills Emma. Paul always loses Emma, and in some way or another he always loses his humanity, whether it's stripped from him or he's replaced entirely. But through inhumanity, Paul finds happiness. His life is given purpose, as one of Pokey's many obedient hive slaves, as Melissa's precious cat, as M-Droid's loyal husband. He gets to be happy, but it's never really him. The only Paul who gets true happiness is his clone, who stole that chance from the original. Otherwise, Paul is melted down to fit a mold, changed to suit the vision of someone who can't stand or can't accept his authentic self, changed to fit a role he's been assigned, to accept a happiness he would never want, because Paul's will is breakable, his wants are simple, to be happy and loved. That tends to be his downfall. For better or for worse, Paul Matthews always chooses love. Love for M-Droid over morality, Melissa's love over freedom, love for Emma over survival. He'll do anything, become anything, good, bad, or otherwise, if it means he can be loved. And the one person who sees him for who he is, who understands and loves him genuinely, is the person he seldom gets to stay with. But hey, beyond all the timelines, there's always me. I've been here for years, and I'll be here forever to love Paul. I love him regular, I love him in a sweater, I love him as a clone. Jury's out on the cat thing, but I definitely love him infected. I cannot overstate how much I love Paul infected. Epilogue, an open invitation for infected Paul Matthews to vomit into my mouth. Hey, thanks for watching this feature-length video about my favorite guy. Hope you enjoyed. This is dedicated to my friends I've met through Hatchetfield. What a special thing to love this world together. Thank you for being part of my life. I love you all. Okay, enjoy these bloopers. The office scene of Paul and his co-workers showed his unabashed Paul and Emma exchanged names, but before they're mute? They're muted. What? Jesus. When accroached, literally 2 words in. 2 words into the take. Oh no. Greenpeace girl makes a sarcastic crack at him as he walks away, and he turns heel to defend himself. If stammering was a language, I would be fluent. Look how happy these infected people are. Look at them dancing a fun little ditty and shitting in the street. Paul assumes he was called in because he hasn't turned in his weekly reports, and defends himself before Mr. Davidson says anything at all. Oh, I lost my place. I can't even read. Guys, why do you listen to me? Panicking, he runs straight out of work and to Beanie's, seeking a shred of What the fuck was that? Down in the bunker, Bill and Ted are arguing, and Paul tries to play Peeper. The next day, Paul tries to fuck. Love that for him. Paul stays late at work that night to make his plans with Emma when he's seemingly attacked by non-Ted office sleaze Frezzy Frasbear.